Hey, this is Chuck Marshall with Metalwani, and I'm talking to Devin Townsend. Devin, how are you doing, man?
I'm okay, man. It's what day is it today? It's
Uh,
Friday.
Friday.
Holy cow.
That's awesome. So first
That's
off, I want to thank you so much for the quarantine uh, uh, concerts that you did. They were
welcome.
fantastic. I, enjoyed. It was fun to watch you with all the different camera angles, and it was really cool to hear Almost Again, because I've never actually heard you play that live. And I enjoyed it. I thought, probably, I'm guessing a lot of fans enjoyed it as well. How important was it to you while you were stuck at home to do those projects?
Well, really important. I mean, aside from the necessity of having to pivot my career, right?
Hmm.
Because it's what I do for my livelihood and with CD sales gone as they were, and then
Right.
live shows as well, it's without sort of taking proactive steps towards it, that could have been really bad news, right? So on a practical level, it was important.
Yeah.
But also there's that only goes a certain amount of distance before you're feeling resentful of it, and what really allows it to not get to that point is just I've been saying to the audience for so many years how thankful I am for this job and how grateful I am for people to support it, specifically nowadays when there's really no need to support with physical media. Like, why
Yeah.
would you? It doesn't make any sense, right? So the fact that people do is something I don't take lightly, and it gave me an opportunity to show that I felt that, I guess.
Yeah.
And and it's also nice as well to have some sort of sense of community as well. For me, I'm so used to sort of being around the audience and all these sorts of things. So when you see familiar faces and avatars and all that, there's a sense of community there that I think is important to my work,
Uh,
actually. So it's a lot of things, but very important is the short answer.
all right. Uh, Order of magnitude, the Empath Live Volume 1 is coming out on the 23rd.
Yeah.
Um, I got a chance to see it and listen to it. I really love the musical performances. It sounds incredible. But I really enjoyed watching the DVD, mainly because of seeing the band and the crowd interactions. You get this big hall, but there's a sense of like closeness. And I was wondering, was it a goal when you guys were filming that to try to make it immersive so that when somebody's watching the DVD, they feel like they're there? Because I felt like I was there.
You know what, I think what tends to happen is the band and the performance dictates what gets filmed. Like a lot of times when I did the Plovdiv show, for example, the situation there and the environment was so epic
Mhm.
that when we looked at the footage, that's what came across, this sort of this sense of size. And one of the most interesting things that happened with the Empath Volume 1 band that I was hoping for, but certainly hadn't completely expected, is that these 10 people and the crew would form a bond that was very communal and very intimate. And I think that by the time we got to the filming of that, it was just towards the end of the tour, and we had established this rapport with ourselves, and I think it came across more than anything else because that's what the band was. It was this intimate environment.
Yeah.
And just because as well, a lot of the performances based in improv and sort of changes and sort of seat of the pants. Um, After a while, it just that's the avenue that it seemed to want to take. That was the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
I'm very happy it did too, because it was such a great, it was so much fun,
Yeah,
man.
you can see that. You can see the fun. I mean, it looked like you guys were all genuinely having a great time on stage,
We
and
were,
the crowd was just feeding off that, and
yeah.
it was great.
And
Um,
it's just such high level players too, wearing Hawaiian shirts. I just love that dichotomy. I just think it's like, because how it comes across in my estimation is much less like a big rock show that
yeah,
we're like,
yeah,
and next on stage is, you know what I mean?
right,
There's this kind of BS that goes along with that larger than life thing that is it's never really been a big draw for me. So having all these people
yeah,
who I think are also brilliant just kind of like wander on stage, you know what I mean, and get a drink is like, I
Right.
thought it was great, man.
Yeah. You know, like you mentioned, you've got like top-notch players in the band. Their performances are just draw drop. I mean, when I watched, especially like Heaven's End and Deadline or Castaway and Genesis, I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
those were just really standouts for me.
Oh
Um,
man.
that seamless interplay that you guys had was just, you know, it's pretty amazing considering the complexity of the music. And I was wondering, what was the most satisfying aspect for you of that experience of playing with that band at that time?
It'd be the personal aspect of it. I mean, perhaps when I was younger, I would seek out players with like a 90% of my decision being based in how uh, proficient they were.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes you end up with a bunch of proficient people that maybe lack a bit personality wise, and maybe not individually, but just like you put them all together and it's like there's,
Yeah,
you know, either ego or competition or what have you.
yeah,
So this time going into it, it was really 50-50 with each player. I was like, as much as the prerequisite for them to be fantastically talented at their instrument
mm-hmm.
was forefront in my mind, it was also equally as important that they were like chill, that they were, you know, good people to hang out with and
Yeah.
not dramatic. And finding people of that level was really interesting to me because they've done so much that the conversations were never about music. You know what I mean? Or work, at least. So when we were
Right.
off stage, it was always, you know, just talk about books or movies or songs or whatever.
Yeah.
But it was never about gear or, you know, it's, and there was something about that that I found on a social level to be just so refreshing, that when we were on stage together, there was a playfulness with it because everybody was really in command of their instrument. So there's no
Right.
like fear. It's not like if somebody fucks something up that the stagecoach was going to go off the road. It was
Right.
just like everybody was like, oh, that's where we're going now. Okay. You know what I mean?
Right. That's awesome.
Yeah.
You know, back to the DVD, those pack shots, you know, with the big wide angle shots of the crowd, and then the close up to the crowd. Um, I have to admit, when I watched it, I felt a little wistful because of the pandemic, and especially during when I was watching Y, the
Yeah.
crowd, you know, jumping up and down, you know, hands ahead,
Yeah. I
peeking.
forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that it was great. You know, it was
Yeah.
so awesome, and but it made me like miss, and you know, that concert experience.
Does it make you feel like it never actually happened? This is where I'm at with it. When I see shows like this, I'm like,
Yeah.
that never happened. That wasn't a thing. You know? In fact, sometimes I'll see movies now where people are in a crowd together, and I'm just
Why
like,
not?
oh, dude, no, dude, you don't do that.
I was wondering, do you think that we all took that for granted, and the pandemic has said, "Hey, you need to be grateful about the things you have when you have music."
I mean, I think you could say that, but I would also say that that whole adage of not wanting to take things for granted can be exhausting as well, because I think there's a part of me that feels like it should be a foregone conclusion that I take for granted, for example, that I can breathe,
Right.
or I can walk, or my hands work, or I've got a roof over my head, or I've got food. And in the past, I've experimented with like constantly trying to affirm how grateful I was for things. And I found that I was just, that's all I did. Like, oh, I'm so grateful for this plate. I'm so
Right.
grateful for, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So on some level, I had to sort of relegate that sort of thinking to, okay, in the morning, I do a meditation or whatever. I'm going to sort of do a blanket of that. I'm like, I'm
Right.
really grateful for
Yeah.
all of this.
Right.
And so when things go away, uh, my first thought is not, wow, I should have been more grateful for that. More just like, oh, that was really cool.
Yeah.
And if it comes back, that'll be great, because there were certain things about that that were great. But you know, progress relies on change, and I found that there's certain things that I've had to learn, and that I've had to be forced into learning during
Mhm.
this whole pandemic, that as much as I I can't say I've enjoyed this. I mean, it's been man, my blood pressure, I can't even imagine at this point.
Right.
But 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 there's been certain aspects of it that I'm like, oh, that was really unexpectedly beautiful, or that was really unexpectedly profound. And had that other thing which I loved not gone away, I wouldn't have experienced that. So
Hmm.
checks and balances, I guess, right?
Yeah. I was checking out your latest podcast, where were talking about social media, and I was curious. Have you watched the movie Social Dilemma?
Yeah, I watched it the day of that, actually.
Oh,
The day that I put that up, I got recommended it by a bunch of people. And yeah, what that implied to me is this is something that as a society, I think we're all thinking.
yeah, yeah.
But I also feel that as devil's advocate, we're in this situation as social animals where our ability to be social is not available. So the only option we have in a lot of ways is social media. And
Oh,
as distressing as the algorithms have become and in the ways that they play into our weaknesses, I think we got to forgive ourselves as well for just being like, yeah, but this is how we have to do it.
oh yeah.
Even on a work front, I can't just be like, okay, now I'm a Luddite
Right.
and I'm gonna send out concert announcements by smoke signals or something. It's it's just not
Right.
efficient, right?
Yeah.
But moderation is certainly interesting.
Yeah, and I think that was part of that. What I took away from that movie is that, it started off with like a lot of good intentions. I think most people were thinking of it as, hey, I can keep in touch with my friends. I can, if I'm in a band, I can promote my band, um, and then that tool became something to more about using you as opposed to you using it. Um, and yeah, I just wanted
I
to
think it's
hear
human
about
nature,
that.
unfortunately. I mean, I've often struggled with the idea of monetizing work because that really changes the intention of it.
Mhm.
But I also know that as professional musician and a father and husband and son and all these things, there's certain responsibilities that I have in life that cost money. So
Right.
it's an unfortunate reality in a similar way as social media in a sense. But I guess my point is that I'd be doubtful that you put a whole bunch of human beings together creating these algorithms without like a centralized leader. You just get a bunch of these people that are like in tandem. And then at the end of it, of course, everyone's gonna be like, oh shit, we made these money making devils
Right.
that just now infiltrate society to the point where it's disintegrating. But I don't think that was avoidable. You know what I mean? Like, at least you know,
Yeah.
there's altruism to a certain extent with human beings, but I think when money's on the line and
Right. Yeah.
fancy Christmas presents, I think you're going to be like, or we could just do that
Yeah.
and blame him.
Right. The other thing that came up when I was um, like watching your podcast, is, and then thinking about the earlier podcasts that you done like back in April. Um, it has that, we're kind of going through the music, going in depth, going into the, what you were feeling and thinking about while you're making the older music, plus how you were living your experience of that music at that time. But it also seems like now the podcast transitioning just a little bit into more current themes, things about that you're thinking about today. And I'm wondering, do you feel like the podcast is a useful tool for you to yet another tool to engage with fans and give them that insight? And do you think it will continue, or do you think it's just going to play out?
I don't know. I tend to function uh, selfishly in a sense, in that I do what I'm compelled to do. Because if I'm not compelled to do it, it's gonna suck. It's like I've proven that to myself time and time again, where I'm like, well, what would be really uh, on a business level advantageous is for me to do X. But
Right.
if my heart's not in it, it sucks. You know what I mean? So whenever I do these podcasts, it's because I feel compelled to do it rather than obligated. And if that continues, then then absolutely. My initial idea was just to go through all the records,
Mhm.
and that way I could kind of have the arc in which my personal life had evolved, explain the process of how these records came to fruition without it appearing, once it's been explained, it's just being this random thing, which I think a lot of people have interpreted it as. You know, you go from Alien to Casualties of Cool to Infinity to Terria to Ziltoid to Ghost, and you know, you can be forgiven for thinking it's an indicator of like mental illness on my part, that, you know, but my idea for explaining it was much more about trying to get across the point that my work functions primarily as an extension of the process, and the process is the thing that is the most important, bar none. The music is a happy accident. It's like the exhaust of that. And what is my goal? My goal is to become the best that I can be as a person, the most functional that I can be as a person. And that requires a lot of missteps and a lot of experimentation, because that's just how I'm wired.
Yeah.
So by the time I get to the end of the podcast, I'm hoping that that trajectory will be clearer to people. So even though someone might prefer strapping or prefer Ocean Machine or prefer Epicloud or whatever,
Yeah.
there's less gray area about why it went in that direction. And my ultimate goal with that is, there's a lot of artists or musicians, younger musicians, that tend to ask me questions or pay attention to what I'm doing. And there's a lot of things that I've been through that I think, hey, you know, that was important for me to experience in order for me to get to this next step. There's a
Right.
whole lot of shit that went through that I was just like, you know what? If somebody had told me that, that would have been really helpful,
Yeah.
right? And then I think finally, the reason why the podcast changes over time is because in the beginning, the function of my work was entirely selfish, really was. I
Yeah.
didn't have kids. I was like, I had this inflated sense of self-importance that came from a number of situations and scenarios. So the early stuff that I'd be talking about, if I'm going to be accurate about its description, is going to be very much full of that.
Right.
But as we move towards where I'm at now, man, the last one will probably be like, oh, it's a sunny day out. You know what I mean? Like,
Do you think that, or have you ever been approached? Because I feel like some of the explanations in the podcast are almost like mentoring sessions. And like you said, if I'd known that, if somebody had mentored me about these things, then maybe I mean, you have to fail to learn, right? You have to make
mhm.
mistakes, but you don't necessarily have to fall on your face and, break your
Yeah,
nose. You could just kind
yeah.
of trip and, so have you ever been approached like that, to be like somebody's mentor or mentor somebody in that way?
Maybe, yeah, to a certain extent. But I mean, I'm not particularly interested in it. And maybe it's my own bias, because whenever I see someone call himself a life coach, it's just like my
Yeah.
asshole puckers up. You know what I mean? I'm just like, oh God, no,
Yeah.
man. You
Right.
know, it's like there's this implication by anybody who puts themselves out as a coach or a mentor that
Right.
they've got their shit together. And I've got my shit together to a certain degree,
Right.
but man, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like I'm still, you know, it's 48-52 shit together versus gong show, depending on the day. So I think that I would want to be careful with sort of dispensing that information
Yeah.
in fear that someone takes it as gospel, right?
Yep. So just a couple last things. You've got another concert coming up on the 31st of October, I think, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And that'll be
Yeah. Yeah. This one will be interesting. It'll be a Halloween one.
yeah.
I've
So
got an idea for this that I think is going to be really funny.
like,
I mean, it's like really good too, but it's going to be there's tons of songs. I mean, I got so many songs in my catalog, and most of which I've never played, right? So this
right.
one is, I've got a poll that's online right now, and then I'll take the songs that get the most votes, and I will learn those and play those. But I'm going to do it sort of wrapped up in a Halloween theme. I mean, we do costume contests and, you know, and
Awesome.
like a bunch of fun stuff, right? It'll be fun, man. I mean, it's
Yeah.
Halloween. Everybody's still just blown away by the peculiarities of this year. So
Yeah.
I'm happy to provide something that makes it seem like for an hour and a half, things
Right.
are reasonably normal.
uh, so Devin, last question for you is, what is your favorite breakfast food?
I have a masticating juicer.
Oh,
I have an Omega 2000, I think it's called. Maybe it's not that name. Maybe maybe it's the Galaxy Quest thing. But it's this big, I spent $300 on it. It's like this big juicer with this rotating plastic dong that just like grinds shit up.
yeah.
And I make a juice that is a Granny Smith apple, half of a cucumber, a kiwi, shitload of ginger, turmeric, black pepper, a shitload of parsley, a shitload of kale, and it looks like pond scum. Like it's this weird
Right.
green brown,
Right.
like obnoxious liquid. But it because I stopped drinking coffee a while back again, and the morning is my best time to work, and that type of fuel for me, I feel super clean when I have it in the morning.
How does it
So
taste?
what's that?
How does it taste?
It's not bad. It's
Yeah.
way better than it looks. You know what I mean? Like it looks like just a mason jar full of frog guts or something, but it tastes okay. It's kind of like weird apple ginger juice with a bunch of like particulate. But I really like that because I put cayenne pepper in it as well, so it can get really spicy
Mhm.
and my brain, it's like dude, it puts me on point like
Awesome.
immediately. Yeah.
Awesome. I might have to try that.
Yeah, it's great. It's
Yeah.
great.
Although I'll have to get the Mega Juicer 5000 or whatever that is.
Dude, man. There's ones that are like stratospherically better than mine. But mine was pretty good. It's $300 so, it's like even when I bought it. So I
Right.
took it on tour. It's been on tour. It's been everywhere, that stupid.
Really?
Yeah, so what I would do is I just prior to each show, like on the rider, I would ask for a bunch of vegetables so I could juice them.
Yeah.
And it was really funny what you'd get. Some places, you get to LA, for example, and you get like all the stuff. It's all organic and beets and all this shit. But then we got to Poland, Krakow, and it was just a really, really dismal day and everything. And the juice stuff they gave us was a bunch of lemons and cabbage. So we gave it a whirl, and yeah, it's not good, man.
You should record those, to have as little snippets,
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. It's like, I find that again, I function best when I don't think that everything I do is worth being heard.
Well, yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, because as soon as I think, oh, this is a good idea, and I start to focus on it, a lot of times I lose the idea. If I'm just like riffing and just being a jackass, it's like easy. But as soon as I think, oh, we should capture that, then all of a sudden I start stumbling, right? So
Yeah.
Anyway,
All right.
it's great to talk to you, man. Thank you so much for the interview.
Yeah. Thank you. Talk
You
to you
bet,
later.
man. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye.